We have tried to estimate, but we have no instrumentation to show that. No proof, no gauge, no baseline. God knows what shape those instruments are in. We just estimate and speak softly. They are injecting water, but we don't know what's down there. Containment is lost, but we don't say that publicly. We don't really believe that's an accurate level. We've asked about grab samples, no indication of ability to do that. Relying on data we can't verify and values we can't convert. If you open the vent manually, you may never be able to close it again. Potential flammable mixture, possibly explosive. We're raising up to detonation level in Unit 1.
It's not about facts, it's confidence. It's a who do you trust kind of thing. The press release was intended to downplay concerns. Most calls go to voicemail, they're trying to return them. If it's a member of the public, they're feeding them back to ops.
Containment integrity.
Hello.
We think it's been lost in 2 and 3.
They believe they are losing pressure.
Always takes me a
was
minute
about
to get
9
up
pounds.
to speed. My apologies.
Some leakage in the containment.
Yeah, I call it.
10 to 30% per day.
We got a poll
Do we
tonight?
flood? Do we wait?
Miracles are great, but you can't rely on them. The salt blocks circulation, it crusts like baking salt over heat. No dosimeters, no scans, no proof.
There's 4.3 million
Calculate.
Freedom of Information
We assume, we
emails
estimate.
released
We don't expect
post
an energetic
Fukushima by the
reaction,
nuclear industry
but we can't rule it out.
to cover up the
Everything we
Fukushima
know is
radioactive fallout.
secondhand.
Prove a conspiracy?
Containment breached, confidence maintained.
I think so.
There is no instrumentation to show that.
It's a great little video, man. Wow. James kicks ass. You find that at James Lewis's site on YouTube, along with hundreds of anti-nuclear songs. And he put that song out recently, and I said, I gotta do another video on Freedom of Information. So they released 4.3 million redacted emails. The links are below the videos to all of them. They're at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's website, so you linked over there, and the files are PDF files. And the one we're covering today was about 1,000. This one is 561 pages. There was 2 different PDF files. There's over 1,000 pages. I've been slow burning through for a while. And I said, well, let's talk about that stuff. And you can talk about it yourself if you want to. You can call into these shows. 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. That's right, we're in Canada. Home of the resistance. Here we go. Do we really need my big head in there? Why not? I got a button that does this, so I might as well get in there. April the 10th, 2011, 8:45 p.m. BlackBerry transition. Everybody was using Blackberries because that was considered... In 2011, that was considered secured communications. It wasn't, probably, but... Eric Stadt is returning from Japan. He'll be leaving his working BlackBerry with Brian Wicktick and will bring Brian's non-functioning BlackBerry back home with him. So Brian showed up to replace him. He gave Brian his BlackBerry, and then he took Brian's BlackBerry. He would like his normal BlackBerry reactivated, so it'll be working when he lands in DC on the 11th of April. This is exactly 1 month later. The water of which the dose rate was at a level of more than 1,000 millisieverts, that's a sievert. So 3 to 4 sieverts just hanging out there for 10 minutes or so is considered a lethal dose to a human. Your organs will melt. You don't need to drink it or anything. It was confirmed to be collected in the pit. So there was these 4.3 million emails. And there's a whole bunch in this one. There's 561 pages. But there was all kinds of information that the nuclear industry communicated back and forth. And everything was, as you'll see, everything was about covering. This was the original year, the first month. And you can see even, we'll be talking about the 14, 15, 16, day 4, 5, and 6. It's a blatant cover-up, but yet they had to release these emails because freedom of information. And there is no checks and balances, so they couldn't care less. But it does give us incredible insight. So they're talking about collected in the pit, a vertical portion of the underground structure for laying electrical cables, located near the intake channel of Unit 2. You have reactors blowing up, so nobody was physically going to go there. But this is the official story they released. So the cover story was ready to go. I guess it's wrapped up on a package, sitting on a shelf. And if there's an event, they roll it out, and they got this protocol to build a story, which gets released and is the official cover story. I guess that's how it works. And in the idiotic world we created by the nuclear industry, never having checks and balances. The outflow from the crack with a length of 20 centimeters. So they're talking about a crack in the wall at Fukushima building. I don't know. So there's a 20 centimeter crack, which is a tiny amount. It's not a very big crack, right? It's probably about this big. It's 2/3 of a foot. It's 8 inches, right? In the pit, into the sea was confirmed. In order to stop they're talking about a sievert, a full sievert. Now, everything, like, it's a volume is the sievert. We'll be putting out the so-called energy. And so you got a crack that needs to be dealt with because it's a sievert. But as it pulls up, it becomes 2 sieverts, 3 sieverts, 12 sieverts, 100 sieverts. Think of us, really, the nuclear industry is not much you compare it to, right? So it's like a matchstick. Someone takes a matchstick and puts it by your finger. And then somebody takes a blowtorch and puts it by a finger on your other hand. Which hand are you going to pull away first? The one with the blowtorch, right? Because you get serious damage and there's nothing you got to get out of it. Well, a sievert is the same thing, but you might not feel it. But once you get up to 3, 4, 5, 10 sieverts, and they would have in this application. So what they said was they poured cement there to stop the cement from leaking or hemorrhaging this material that was measured at 1,000 millisieverts. Now we're assuming this is a liter per liter. So you got 2 liters is 2 sieverts, 3 liters is a lethal dose. Your organs actually start to melt. More than 1,000 millisieverts, 100,000 microsieverts is considered a full sievert, and 3 sieverts sitting alongside of it 10, 15, 20 minutes is a lethal dose. Your organs start to melt and you'll die sometime that day. If you're there for 5 minutes, you'll die that week. If you're there for 20 minutes, you'll die, or 1 minute, you'll die next week. But the damage is permanent. In order to stop the outflow, concrete was poured into the pit. When you're talking about multiple sievers, how do you like, what happens is this stuff is now going to build up to the surface, right? If you block up a leak of lethal doses by the liters, all you're going to do is now have liquefaction in the soil, and so now you're going to have a bigger problem. But you can't get near it because it's a lethal dose. It's not like it's just 1 liter. So again, what they're telling you is not true. It's part of that cover story, right? It's much worse than that. And yeah, they probably did pour cement in there, but whoever done it would have died. The upper part of the power cable trench for power source at the intake channel. Well, there was no power because you had a tsunami run through the site. And on the date that we're talking about, the site actually blew up, so you had 36 reactor cores spread all over the site. These are lethal doses no matter where you're looking. Approximately 13 kilograms of tracer milk white bath agent was put in the pit for the duct for seawater pipe. So this was a tracer. So you had this lethal doses all over the site because this is the original nuclear meltdown. This is the last thing you're concerned about. And because there is a protocol to do stuff like this in an isolated area, when you're at a nuclear meltdown, the protocol is not applicable anymore. And when you're talking about 4 meltdowns in a row, and at the top of each building was 2 reactor fuel pools. So there was 8 fuel pools. Each fuel pool had at least 4 reactor cores in it. So 36 reactor cores, counting the reactor cores in the buildings. Now, if just one of these buildings lose their inventories, which is non-reactor cores, you can't get near the other buildings. So when you got 4 buildings, and when you have the dispersal on a scale that is unprecedented, never before recorded, there is no protocol. Freshwater injection at around 70 tons to the spent fuel pool cooling line using the temporary this was April the 4th. I just can't remember which building was this. It doesn't matter. It'll straighten itself out here in a moment. I think it's reactor 3 that we're talking about. We'll see. White smoke was confirmed to generate continuously. Yeah, this is reactor 3 they're talking about. And the pressure in the primary containment vessel, the PCV, the pressure containment vessel, and the RPV is the reactor pressure vessel of Unit 3. So we're talking about Unit 3, that's right, because that's why I got that picture there. Unit 3. This was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. The fuel pools were at the top of the building. So there's a bit of a problem here because there's no top to the building. So how can you put water, 70 tons of water in a pool? All the buildings are the exact same diagram. This is reactor 4, but which officially this never happened. That's the official picture at all over there, but that didn't happen. You can go to TEPCO and download the picture, but it didn't happen. And we got 4.3 million emails for the cover story was set and coordinated by the International Atomic Energy Agency and the Nuclear Regulatory Commissions. Took all of their narratives from the degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency. So the fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. The explosion like Unit 1 occurred around the reactor building. Well, Reactor 3 was different than Reactor 1 detonating, because Reactor 3 was the plutonium mixed oxide fuel reactor. Don't worry, it'll make sense. Hopefully at some point. Unless you go to the media, then nothing will make sense for you. So reactor 3, that was what the reactor looked like in the first couple of weeks. And so again, the depiction or the schematics of all the reactors at Fukushima are all the exact same. The colors are the exact same. Everything's exact. They're exact replicas. They're clones of each other. In Unit 3, the explosion like Unit 1 occurred around the reactor building. Well, look at it again. Did it occur around the reactor building? The white smoke, like steam, generated from Unit 3. The white smoke is like steam, is what they're trying to say there. This is not smoke. This is non-reactor cores burning off. This is not smoke. This is, if you swing through that like Tarzan on a big crane rope, you died when you came out the other side of that so-called smoke. That smoke turns into radioactive fallout and kills everything with replicating cells forever. So pretty dishonest to call it white smoke, but that's typical. You'll see that a lot. Because of the possibilities that the pressure control valve of Unit 3, maybe did I get that wrong? Sometimes I get caught up in it. Primary containment vessel. I'm sorry. Because the possibility the primary containment vessel of Unit 3 was damaged. The workers evacuated from the main control room of Unit 3. But once Reactor 1 blew up, you couldn't go near it again. I'll show you Reactor 1 and 3 blowing up, by the way. So once Reactor 1 blew up, you can't get into control rooms. You had a tsunami run through the site, so there is no control rooms, okay? What they're telling you is doesn't match up to the evidence. Once Reactor 1 blew up, you had to evacuate the site. There was nothing you can do. But the problem was you had a tsunami ran through the site. So once that happens, you destroyed all connections to each reactor and for 1,200 kilometers of the coastline. And so it was, once Reactor 3, that was the original explosion, Reactor 3. On the 14, Reactor 4 still hasn't blown up. Yes, it's confusing, but we have the pictures, documentations, we have the knowledge to be able to articulate it, so that you can appreciate it and extrapolate on your own. Thereafter, the operators returned to the room and restarted the operation of water injection, March the 16th. Well, March the 16th, all the reactors had already detonated, all 4 of them, and the fuel pools have all detonated, so that there's nobody returning to anywhere. You had 9 reactor cores ejected right out of the building and the fuel pools. Visibly, I got, just bear with me, I got the video of Reactor 3 and Reactor 1 exploding. Just let me play with this for a second. So they were taken from, I can't remember what kind of camera this was, like a surveillance camera, 30 kilometers away. And they zoomed in on the reactors. And this my apologies. We turned that down. Oops. Go on, number 1. And boom. So that was the fuel pool at detonating at Reactor 1. So that was 8 reactor cores going off. And this is lethal doses. If you fly through that on a plane, that's a lethal doses. If you're in a house in a community 10 kilometers away, when this plume finally gets there, that's a lethal doses. It was over 10 sieverts per hour, 10 kilometers away. the plume that came through. This should be reactor 3 exploding. Yeah, this is reactor 3 exploding. And you can actually see big chunks falling back down right away, but they're leaving a huge trail of what looks like smoke. That's the reactor cores exposed to oxygen burning off. They flash up at 1800 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. That's reactor 3. So you can't get on the site now because you put 16 reactor cores all over the site. Just from the 2 fuel pool buildings, or the 2. But there was 36 reactor cores total melted down. Just bear with me. I'm just going to make sure I put this where I can find it later. There we go. All right, and away we go again. So that doesn't look like hell, right? Does it? It doesn't, like, it's hard to comprehend how that is an issue here in Canada or United States or in the ocean or anywhere else, right? It's very difficult to. That's reactor 1, rather, and this is reactor 3. And this was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. And that's, you're actually looking at the fuel pools in the reactor cores falling back down onto the site. So this is hellish. This is a no man's land forever. This is a Neptunium-239 dispersal based on, not the inventories I just showed you, but based on fake numbers. So the Neptunium-239 decays to plutonium-239 in 2.5 days. That's a 20-day model covering the entire planet. So that means all the fresh water, all the seawater, all your drinking water, all your communities, everything is. But there's also a plutonium dispersal based on 20 days also. So it's really difficult when you look at the buildings to appreciate the enormity of what just happened, because you can't perceive it. Right? My Geiger counter can, 220 counts per minute of gamma. Seawater is discharged 4 times to Unit 3 by the helicopter of the Self-Defense Force, March the 17th. So March the 17th, all the buildings have already detonated. March the 17th, you had 4. March the 16th, you got 4 buildings with 36 reactor cores lost. Most of it directly into the environment. This is a catastrophic event for everything with replicating cells. It's the stump of reactor 3. Officially, that never happened. The riot police, not academics, not nuclear scientists, not nuclear universities, not nuclear corporations, not Toshiba or Hitachi or not NuScale, there's like no nuclear companies. They're going to send in people that have no concept of what they're dealing with. This was the riot police, because they have water cannons. But they know nothing about radiation. They know zero, zilch. They're the very last people that should have been sent in there. Right? We should have, every nuclear scientist on the planet should have been put on a plane and sent to Fukushima. Or just drop them out of a plane onto the reactors, and so eventually they'll fill up the building. That would have been a better solution. The Self-Defense Force, the military, started the water spray and used a fire engine. Well, the reactors need 4,500 tons a minute each, which is equal to 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks blasting past your front door every 60 seconds, 70 a second. Try crossing the street on that street. So garden hose is equivalent, or fire truck is equivalent to just spitting on the fire. On the nuclear meltdowns, the water spray from the ground was carried out by the riot police, who had no concept of nuclear or anything else, and were the most inappropriate people to send there. They sent them there for that specific reason, because they didn't know nothing about this stuff. Because you could not drag a nuclear scientist there. If you had 100,000 nuclear scientists at a big convention, you asked for a volunteer, say on the same day, nobody would volunteer. In fact, nobody would ever ask that. So you can see debris spewed everywhere. This, which means there's no way a human can survive. Your organs melt right away. It doesn't matter how brave or stoic you are, your organs are going to melt. And it's bye-bye blackbird. The water spray from the ground, which was on the other side of the pump houses. So the water didn't actually reach it. And we have pictures. I've done presentations on 1900 pictures. There's 6 2-hour shows going through the 1900 pictures that were released by TEPCO back in the early days. Let me see if I can skewer up a couple of pictures for you. The madness. Oh, there we go. We got lucky. So this is one of the pictures of what they were talking about. So they're on the pump houses, which is down by the ocean. They're spraying over the pump house, and the reactors, which are on the other side, far. You're talking about at the very end of the hose. So imagine somebody, your neighbor across the street, and you got a garden hose, and you spray towards them, and the wind is kind of blowing towards them. And so a little bit of water might reach them. That would be really polite in this scenario right here of what we're talking about. So maybe 1/100th of that will spray on the ground close to the building, and a fraction of that 1% might actually reach the reactors, but it's too late anyway. Once they blew up, you lost the inventories. Everything else was symbiotic. So you can't get close to the stacks. How are you going to get close to the reactors? Unit 1 and 2 exhaust stacks, high radiation dose rate in the area, had measured over 10 sieverts. So 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. 10 sieverts in this environment is at the base of the tall, skinny stacks. This is the vents for the fuel pools, because the fuel pools are all splitting atoms into your community up to the tall, skinny stacks. The water spray from the ground using 6 fire engines, 6 tons of water per spray engine. Per hour? The reactors need 4,500 tons a minute, not an hour, each. So March the 18th, the buildings are, and this has already happened. Fukushima 311 tapes. It's time to make a geezer suicide squad. A geezer, which is a derogatory name for older people who worked all their life, so the people that said it could have some kind of a future. And so this is a really, really derogatory name. It's time to make a geezer's suicide squad. A geezer. That's an incredible derogatory. And so this is typical of the nuclear industry. This kind of contempt for anybody, particularly older people would experience. They despise them because you can see through their lies, right? The industry is everybody in the nuclear industry is at the very top of a house of cards. That's where they're perched their entire life. And it's very easy to knock them down, but they're protected by themselves, so they don't allow you or me to get near enough to knock down their house of cards, because they physically live in that world. But if you challenge them, they don't know how to respond to you. These were the chicken necks at your school, the little rats that were always ratting out everybody. They grew up and got a job. they went to university, got incredible education, but they couldn't go out and find a job, couldn't even try. So they get multiple bachelor degrees and physics degrees, but they still can't go out and look for a job. So the nuclear industry scoops them up and then weaponizes them against me and you. Hyper Rescue Unit, Tokyo Fire Department. So the Tokyo Fire Department carried out the water spray on nuclear meltdowns, not the nuclear industry, not people trained. That should terrify you, because that's going to be true for every nuclear accident. And if they're going to build another 300 gigawatts in America, for instance, you're going to see a lot more accidents. And the only people that are going to go into the nuclear meltdowns are going to be the people who know nothing about it, your loved ones, your children, your brothers, your sisters, your aunts, your uncles, your parents. They'll send them in there because they don't know nothing. Nuclear academics will never, under any circumstances, go within 100 miles of a nuclear meltdown because they're well-disciplined cowards. The pressure of reactor 3 rose on March the 20th. Well, how can the pressure rise when the building was completely ejected off the site? Right, and there's only a stump left. There is no building. So how could the pressure rise on March the 20th? How could you read pressure when there was no building left? How can we even tolerate this industry for a millionth of a second is pretty amazing. How's the censorship tonight, I wonder? Nasty censorship on me, my goodness. There's 4.3 million Freedom of Information files, emails by the nuclear industry that were released. A lot of this is redacted. To cover up the Fukushima radioactive fallout, prove there's a conspiracy? Well, if it doesn't, then I got no hope in humanity. Oh, look at this. The yellow, but I'm on fiber optics with a gigabyte a second. I got no stream, and we get this now every week. I got no views, and am I streaming? I don't know. Google says I'm not even streaming. Normally, when you see that yellow, you're not streaming. But the last 3 times in the last couple of weeks we've seen this, I've been streaming. Let's keep going. Preparation of load of pressure was carried out. Judging from the situation, immediate pressure relief was not required. Judging from the situation. So when they looked at that, they said, number 3, there was no need to... this is absurd to suggest that there's anybody close to it, let alone anything functional. There's nothing functional on that site, let alone blown up reactors. What a disgusting industry. What a bizarre, kooky friggin' industry. If you don't get rid of the industry because it's killing every species on the planet, guess what happens? Water sprayed over spent fuel pool of Unit 3 by the Hyper Rescue Unit. Like, there is no fuel pool at Reactor 3, clearly, in everything I showed you. Greyish smoke generated Unit 3 on March 21st. The smoke was confirmed to have died down. Well, that's Reactor 3. It's not smoke, it's nuclear meltdowns burning at whatever's left is burning at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Calling it smoke, the entire nuclear core is ejected into the environment. U.S. government's worst case scenario likely reality. Again, it's so hard to get anybody acknowledging what happened. It's literally impossible to get anybody to acknowledge in the industry. So you got to be pretty coordinated to pull that off. Lighting was recovered in the central operation room March the 26th. This is simply not true. This is the farthest thing from March 22nd. And 10 days after, 36 reactor cores blow up. I mean, first off, you had a flood. It raged right through the entire site. There is no control rooms. It ripped. Not only did you have fuel ejected all over the site that just a gram of it will kill you walking past it. You're talking about 24 million pounds of it spread all over the place. Oh no, they got power turned back on, Dana, on the 22nd. My goodness. But then you're talking about 4.3 million emails, and then I've never read an email, and I've read a ridiculous amount over the years, my goodness. I don't even want to try to guess, 50,000 pages? At least that much anyway. Seawater injection of 35 tons to the spent fuel pool via the fuel pool cooling line was carried out March the 23rd. Another 120 tons of seawater was ejected via the fuel pool cooling lines. I'm not sure what reactor they're talking about. It's reactor 3. There is no fuel pool lines. There is no fuel pools in these buildings at this point. And this is was March the 15th or March the 16th. Day 5, say day 5. Say day 6. Let's say 10 days later. It's not. It's like day 5 or day 6. There's nothing. You can't walk around there without getting a lethal dose. Like you're going to die within hours, minutes, or that day. Slightly blackish smoke generated from the reactor buildings. 23rd. 24th. It was reported smoke seemed to cease. My goodness, to suggest that anything is smoke there. Any smoke you see is the nuclear fuel burning something at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Water, and you got to have the right temperatures to see a lot of the emissions. You got to have a temperature inversion in order for you to be able to. It'll look like steam, it'll look like smoke, but it's not. Water spray by the Kawasaki City Fire Bureau, supported by the Tokyo Fire Department, March 25th. These are people who have no concept of what a nuclear is or a nuclear meltdown. And it's really something. You have 4.3 million emails from the nuclear industry, none of them that had been to that site. The 4.3 million emails, none of them were people that came from this site, that were at this site. This was just a cover story worldwide playing out in real time. The nuclear industry is one of the most coordinated industries I've ever seen. I've never seen nothing like it, to tell you the truth. The fire at Unit 4 occurred March the 15th. And TEPCO reported the fire was extinguished spontaneously. Yeah, so did the media. The media said everything was fine. They're pretending 2 years later to be 150 feet above the stump to your left. Is that not a conspiracy? Am I... Like, I'm not a conspiracist. I deal in facts, documentation. I don't have an opinion, no conjectures. There's no need to. We only talk about facts. La 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 la. Bear with me here. There are cases. Why are they pretending they're on a building that doesn't exist? They're not even in Japan. There's 70 identical reactors in the United States. So they went to one of the reactors in the United States and shot the videos sanctioned by the local nuclear plant that they went to put out a cover story for what happened in Japan. It's really hard for me to rationalize that people are that evil. It's even worse when you see how many are that evil. Yeah, it's so sad. And the reason they're like it is because they've never been held accountable. They have never been held accountable in their entire lives.
Handle with care, I'm burning through. Hazardous heat, it's me and you.
There's a song called Hold Me Like a Spent Fuel Rod.
Touch too close will amplify. Unstable and electric. They keep me locked, but I'm still in play. Hold me tight, don't melt away. Not your average, I'm far from safe. Dance with me on the edge of fate. Hold me like a spent fuel rod. Dangerous yet so flawed. Can't cool me down, I'm ticking away. One wrong move and we'll decay.
It cracks me up.
In the dark, far from the crowd, but
So we make jokes, terrible jokes sometimes, how with certain pictures of Fukushima, where you got a bunch of homeless people in a picture, and we'll say, when the first guy drops dead, the next one pick up the fuel rod and run with it. And he'll drop dead 15, 20 seconds later. The next guy picks up the fuel rod, which is 18 pounds, 12 feet long, and he'll run about 10, 12 seconds. He'll drop dead, and the next homeless guy pick it up and pick up the fuel rod and run with it. Because that's your life expectancy in proximity to this stuff, is 12 seconds or so. Like the minute you try to pick it up, you're already a dead man walking. The fire occurred at Unit 4 on the 16th of March. TEPCO, which is not an authority in nuclear, they're just an operator. They buy the reactors. It's like you're not a mechanic. You didn't build your car. You can't fix your car, but you own a car, right? And you're good at it. You know how the brakes work, and you're really good at parking, and that's all TEPCO is, right? They're an operator. They're not a decommission authority. They're not engineers. They're operators. Excuse me. So reactor 4, that's reactor 4 over there. The building doesn't exist. But that doesn't stop the industry from pretending they're at the top of the building and pumping out propaganda. So originally, that's what it looked like right there. This is 190 feet tall. This is 150 feet wide. It's 190 feet tall, 19 stories, 65-meter tall building. The self-defense force, they said there was no fire. Look at it. Clearly there was no fire. Like, how do you imagine your significant other or your best of best friends, and you show them this picture and they say, well, everything looks good to me. There was no fire. And you're like, well, no, come on, stop playing games. The building's blown up, right? And like, no, it's perfect. Look at it. That's what you're dealing with the nuclear industry. And they're such cowards the way they do things. Their entire pedigree, their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents had those same attributes. These cowardly, unconscionably coward, unbelievably cowards is the only way. It's unbelievable cowards is the best way to. Self-defense force started spraying water over the spent fuel pool Unit 4 from the other side of the turbine buildings, rather. Not pump houses, but the turbine buildings. Water spray over the spent fuel pool by the self-defense forces using 13 fire engines was started March the 21st. Well, the reactors were gone on March the 16th. That's what it looked like on March the 16th. So spraying water on it didn't mean... Bear with me. Let me bring up another one of those pictures. So you're down by the ocean, and there's a big building in front of you, and on the other side of that, across the road, is the stump of reactor 4. So you're spraying with 13 fire engines. Well, only one fire engine was working after the tsunami. There was some brought in. Again, they had no function because you couldn't get near the buildings. Oh yeah, and these guys are at the top of that building, 150 feet above the stump to your left. It's a strange industry. It is this is the story, though. This is the accurate story, unfortunately. Works for laying electrical cable to the power center were completed at around 1500 March 21st. And the power center received electricity March 22nd, the next day. So this is day 10. So on day 10, they're saying, day 11 rather, they're saying they went back in, they got power hooked up, and everything is running. Like they're such dishonest, and their dishonesty causes extinction events. They cause hundreds of millions of cancers, hundreds of millions of people with catastrophic heart problems, and they poison the entire food chain and destroy all the species. And they tell you, no, everything's good. The fire trucks were in there, Dana. They were spraying water. We got the documentation. The entire nuclear core ejected from the buildings. Oh, no, but they were back in and connected up to power. And everything's pretty cool. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. Everything is good. Lighting in the turbine buildings were partially turned on April the 2nd. It's 3 weeks later. No, you can't. The buildings actually blew up. Multiple buildings. The dose rate at the water surface were 0.4 millisieverts at the Unit 1 trench. 0.4 millisieverts. In NAMI, it was a full sievert. Children were getting doses of a full sievert. 2,000 times that number right there. Well, look, the reactor 1 blew up in the trench right alongside of reactor 2. And on the other side of reactor 2 was reactor 3. And reactor 3 blew up. Do you really think that it wasn't a million sieverts? Because 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. A million sieverts is just, I'm melting. Then you did. The collected water in the vertical part of the trench outside the turbine building of Unit 1 was transferred to the storage tanks March the 27th. Of the radioactive waste treatment facility with a temporary waste treatment facility. Radioactive waste treatment. So here they're claiming they're at a nuclear meltdown and they're really stoic and they're just grabbing radiation and putting it in a tank so it can be treated. It's so far from the truth. It's so far from any kind of reality that this is a mental illness. You really got to consider bringing back burning people at the stake, right, as an incentive to stop these monsters from destroying the future of every species. You got to bring back firing squads. You got to bring back... These people should be at the Nuremberg trials. We should be having Nuremberg trials for these people. These are unmitigated monsters. These are sadistic demons. These are horrifying, sadistic monsters. Okay, so the vertical part of the trench tanks building radioactive waste treatment facility, you had a tsunami run right through your site. You're not doing jack shit. There's nothing functional on your entire site or your coastline for 1,200 kilometers. In the samples of soil collected on the 21st, 22nd of March on the site of 5 points, the Fukushima Daiichi plutonium 238, plutonium 239, 240 plutonium, detected March the 28 announced by TEPCO, the concentrations of plutonium was at the equivalent level of fallout that was observed in Japan concerning the past atmospheric nuclear testing. In other words, there was no emissions, nothing got out. At the equivalent levels in normal condition of the environment and not at levels of having harmful influences on the body. The reality of it was quite different though, wasn't it? Reactor 3 was the highly lethal plutonium mixed oxide reactor, the MOX reactor. And the entire nuclear core injected into the environment, but the levels were the same as it was 50 years ago. It's evil on a scale that I don't have anything else I can compare it to. And the entire everybody in the nuclear industry is fixated on telling the biggest lies, and they get rewarded, unbelievably rewarded for those lies, for living, for trying to manipulate and successfully manipulating the entire planet. But you can't convince. Like convincing people doesn't change the extinction event that this caused. At the equivalent level of the normal conditions of the environment was not at a level having harmful influences on the human body, but it wiped out all the species. And the species we have left on our planet are a fraction of what it was pre-Fukushima. All the whales are showing up emaciated. All the birds are showing, every species are showing up emaciated. We broke the food chain because of all of this is post-Fukushima, these effects. When removing the flange pipes of residual heat removal seawater system outside the building of Reactor 3, like nobody's outside of Reactor 3 removing stuff, okay? It's absurd to suggest that anybody was. But this is how crazy the 4.3 million emails are. This is how sadistic the entire nuclear industry actually is. 3 subcontractors' employees were wetted by water remaining in the pipe. However, as the result of wiping the water off, they wiped the water off their paper suits, so no radioactive material was attached to their paper suits. These are nuclear meltdowns. Just looking at these is a lethal dose. Nobody's working by the building. Nobody's taking pieces off the building and plugging in lines and pumping water. There is no fuel pools or reactor cores. But that's the insanity of the 4.3 million emails. When you read it, you're not going to see any of the pictures I'm showing you or know any of the documentation. When you read it, it sounds like a plausible story. But the minute that you weigh any evidence against it, you're talking about a sadistic death cult. That's what the nuclear industry should be described as, a death cult. A very successful death cult at wiping out every species on the planet, and you're gonna call them heroes. Excuse me. When removing the flanges of the pipe of the residual heat removal seawater system outside the Reactor 3 building, they got water on the body, so they wiped it off and now everything was okay. This is insanity. It's so far from reality. We have so many examples of this kind of... These are incredibly educated people. They're getting, probably making $250,000, $500,000 a year working for the government in the nuclear industry facets of it. That's Unit 3 over there, by the way. subcontractors, not nuclear scientists, homeless, destitute, went over there and unscrewed a pipe and they got some water on them, so they wiped it off. Now everything is okay at a nuclear meltdown. The spraying for test scattering of anti-scattering agents is a reagent. It's actually green, so it's very visible. And the idea is, that section is a no-go zone. There's a lethal dose in there. It was carried, and so let me show you an example of how sadistic this industry actually is. I'm pretty sure I can find those pictures. They're probably the scariest pictures I've ever seen. And there's quite a few of them. Hang on here. There's other pictures I forgot about. Don't worry, we'll get there. This folder got 1,900 pictures in there, right? So maybe I won't get to it. They're loading pretty fast though, so I gotta make a. There we go. It's friggin' nuts. It's not the best pictures, but whoever done that died that day. That was probably the International Atomic Energy Agency was talking to the guy who was taking the picture, or telling the guy to take the picture was a homeless guy. He would have died that day too. And there was somebody directing, go over there and put your Geiger counter there on the ground. Where that other guy dropped dead there an hour ago. I go to the left of the dead body. I can see the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna directing people to do this. Telling the tattoo guy, the Yakuza guy, to tell this guy to go over and put his Geiger counter. Here we go. This is crazy stuff I'm going to show you right now. There's one picture that is just holy shit. Here we go. Like this picture, he died for sure that day. He died that day. Whoever took these pictures died. Yeah, 100%. Why would you do that? So think about where you stood up to. Like this guy definitely died that day. This guy is definitely a homeless person in a paper suit standing up in a nuclear wasteland. He even looks like he got his boots on the wrong feet. That's a dead man. So the green is the region that they're spraying, is what they're talking about, the anti-scattering agent. And so that's supposed to bind with the fuel particulates that are splitting atoms. And that way you haven't got a high level airborne at that area. But it also means you can't walk through that area. So anybody that you see in there, they died that day or that hour, basically. He would have died within 20, 30 minutes of doing that. The barge, the second ship of the U.S. Armed Forces carrying fresh water, April 2nd, for cooling the reactors. Well, the reactors don't exist. It's so hard to have a conversation with lunatics. Is another problem about telling this story, because you're trying to explain what a lunatic had just said, and you're trying to show the evidence to prove that they're lunatics, but because there's so much of it, you can't keep up with it. So in 2012, early 2013, this is what reactor 3 to your left and reactor 4 behind me looked like. Now reactor 4, officially this has never happened, right? So what they done was they put these contraptions, reactor 3 and reactor 4, they put these contraptions over the buildings. But there was a media that had released a single high quality picture of the site from the right angle that I was able to get this picture and that picture. So I was able to zoom in and extrapolate these high quality pictures. You'll never see these pictures anywhere else. And look at all the garbage or the radioactive debris right here. They didn't clean that up. This construction was built off-site, and then these are just panels that were brought in by a crane, and they're hung there by gravity. You can't physically stand there and do it. It's all done by remote-controlled cranes and gravity. And the structure doesn't physically touch reactor 4 or reactor 3, because underneath them, this is what it looks like. But officially, they said it looks like that in there to your right. And I shouldn't have to show you anything else, but the idea is to educate the population so that there's enough people out there, once they kill me, there's still enough people out there to make sure that they can't win this battle, that the world eventually will wise up and this industry will be abolished. Right? That's the ultimate dream. Because right now, I'm the most hated person on the planet, thanks to the nuclear industry. They have assassinated my character. So clearly, if I die, no one will care, right? I guess that's the plan, is to kill me. But it's safe to kill me because there's only a handful of people that understands that I'm actually a good person, that I have taken the moral high ground because the world needs to appreciate what's really going on. The stagnant water with low level radioactivity in the main building of the radioactive water treatment facility and started to be discharged from the south side of the water discharge canal. Like, first off, they're spraying water from another side of the turbine buildings, the ocean side, with these contraptions. This is all automatic mode, right? You just raise the boom up, point the water, and then run away. And they were talking about that earlier. So the water discharge, you're not discharging anything. You're throwing water at it, and water runs backwards towards the ocean, or downhill towards the ocean, which is right alongside them. Chernobyl, the ocean was 600 miles away. Fukushima is just a few hundred feet, and it's downhill at that. The sea using the first pump, this was April the 4th, further the discharge using 10 pumps was carried out on the same day, the discharge. So they were saying they were pumping water into the ocean. There was low-level radioactive water at a site where there's 36 reactor cores melted down in 5 days. So then the Fukushima Daini nuclear power plant. So this is the twin nuclear power plant 10 kilometers south of towards Tokyo. Unit 1 shut down, 1,700 hours, 1,800 hours for Unit 2, Unit 3, blah, 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 April the 6th. They had no power. There was no... I don't know the whole story. They definitely covered up the Daini plant, what happened there. We have a folder of headlines. Daini was incredibly radioactive, but we haven't been able to get any... there was 15 reactors couldn't go into cold shutdown. They went into what's known as a station blackout, which is the worst case scenario. And if they melted down, we'll never know. They're very successful at covering up. They covered up the most obvious ones, where we have incredible amount of documentation, but it still got covered up. March the 30th, smoke and covering up these kind of events, just a single one, is just evil and sadistic. But you're talking about 36 reactor cores were lost. 36. These were massive plutonium, uranium, pure plutonium reactor cores. Chernobyl, for instance, was a new reactor. It was graphite. It didn't have any fuel pools. It was a small reactor compared to Japan. And it was a graphite reactor, which is totally different. I lost my voice. which is totally different from the pure uranium, pure plutonium of Japan, which each of the reactors were massive reactors. Oh. I've been in the hospital on Friday and again today, Saturday, yesterday. I didn't sleep very good last night, so which means I'm going to crash, hopefully. I'm praying anyway that I crash tonight. And I figured if I don't do the show, I won't get the show in because I'm going to be burnt out. I had a lot of stress, right? Far from over. March the 30th, smoke was rising from the power distribution panel on the first floor of the turbine building of Unit 1. However, when the power supply was turned off, the smoke stopped generating. Like there was no power at Unit 1. Unit 1 detonated and ejected 8 reactor cores. They cooked off right away. And happened to be alongside of 3 other nuclear reactor buildings that melted down, with 9 reactor cores melting down in each of the buildings' fuel pools. The residual heat system, a removal system, to cool the reactors of Unit 1 became able to receive power from the emergency power supply. This back to Donnie, of course. The buildings are completely gone, and everything alongside them. There is no power. You had a tsunami run right through the site, right? There's no infrastructures. I went out this evening and hooked up or put together the plasma cutter. And the plasma cutter uses a compressor, right? So you have 60 pounds of air going through your plasma cutter. So it was a bit of an ordeal finding all the right parts, because they don't send you everything. And so when I finally got everything put together and everything, it was a bit chaotic anyway. I was ready to go to bed at that stage. It's like, nah, if I go to bed now, I'll be screwed. I won't wake up to 12 or 1. I'll wake up 12 or 1 o'clock and be all screwed up. We got a rainy day. Clean up the tool shed because we got a lot of work to get done, and I'm just not healthy enough to do it. But I got no choice but to do it. It won't get done if I don't do it. So I apologize. I'm digressing now. Here we go. Let's get back on track. Oh, this is I don't know if this is the original high quality picture, but this was the picture that I was able to zoom in on. So let's see if I can zoom in on this one just for kicks here. Oh yeah, that's pretty good. So look at the roof, right? Look at all the stuff on the roof. But look at the cover they had put on the reactor 3 and reactor 4. I'll fix it here in a second. You can kind of see so this isn't the high quality one. Otherwise it would look really good like the pictures extraction I showed you. So you see now everything is cemented. All the walls back there are cement. That used to be all grass and that, right? But there was so much fuel, they put that there to try to drop the numbers down. Let me keep going. On April the 5th, it was 0.4 microsieverts in the turbine building. The turbine building, all the radiation is getting washed towards the turbine building. So it's going to be incredible numbers there. And remember, the entire nuclear core was injected into the environment, plus the 8 reactor cores that were in the fuel pool all ejected directly into that area. So to suggest it was 0.4 microsieverts of all things. And there's a lot of this kind of stuff in that particular, and I'm just going to zoom in and then I'm going to shift for you. And so there's not a lot you can take from this. And so I went through 1,000 pages to do the show tonight. I don't think we're going to get through the show tonight because I got a tendency to be to overdo it. So we're only at page 122 of 561 pages, and there's a lot of a lot of stuff. Not all the time, but sometimes you'll get, say, 561 pages, but there's a lot of stuff will get repeated with some slight changes. And it's just too hard to keep track of because you have such a big volume to figure out what they were actually up to. Handling of food contaminated. Now, I put links below so you can go back and find all of this, read through all of it yourself. And those links, you can go down to page 122 and you'll see that paragraph, right? And if I make a mistake, feel free to call me on it. I'm pretty good though, so don't get your hopes up. But hey, it's possible. Nuclides, an index value relating to the ingestion limits and guidelines for coping with disasters at nuclear facilities. Okay, so this is really important stuff. This is crazy stuff, actually, what I'm about to show you. So radioactive, this was limits to drinking and eating food in the nuclear wasteland. Radioactive iodine, and they got radioactive cesium, got uranium. They actually got curium isotopes listed down below. So you're allowed to drink 2,000 becquerels a kilogram in vegetables, or eat 2,000 kilograms in vegetables. My goodness, eh? This is why he had 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Drinking water, milk, and dairy products at 300 becquerels, but they're only talking about radioactive iodine. So then for radioactive cesium, it was 200 atoms per kilogram. That's what you need an atom to produce a becquerel. A becquerel is the pulse of energy, almost at the speed of light every second from the anthropogenic man-made atom. And so they call it becquerel because becquerel doesn't make sense for people. When you call it an atom, that's something you can breathe in, something you can eat, something you can drink, something you can absorb in your skin, and then it attacks your body for the rest of your life by exploding every second. Milk, dairy products, vegetables, grains, meat, eggs, fish, 500 atoms. So that's 2,500 atoms for vegetables of anthropogenic man-made brutal radiation we're talking about. Then you have uranium. Uranium at 20 atoms a kilogram for infants' food. My God, boy. We're talking about uranium-235, by the way. Drinking water, milk, dairy products, vegetables is considered an acceptable level. This is absurdness and overdrive. And curium, plutonium, americium at 10 atoms per kilogram for vegetables, grains, meat, eggs, and fish. And infant foods and drinking water, 1 atom a kilogram. This story is absurd. This is absurdness. The numbers we're talking about. There's 4.3 million Freedom Information files, emails, by the nuclear industry to cover up the Fukushima radiation fallout proved there's a conspiracy. I hope you vote yes if you haven't voted yet, because that's what it is, right? Curium-244. Now, Curium-244 needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium does. So, we're talking, by the way, the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is the Curium isotopes. right, as the Dr. Raymond Gilmedi from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico studies, 98 studies shows us. Just let me find that for you, because otherwise I'm a lawyer. The nuclear industry, they're always searching for a Freudian slip or something. Desperation, right, to smear me. I'm actually, I know it doesn't seem that way if you listen to the industry, but I'm actually a good person. Which is something there's nobody in the nuclear industry can say. Right? There's not a single person in the nuclear industry who can say they're a good person. Yeah, Loveless Respiratory Research Institute was the United States Navy. Dr. Raymond Gilmedi was the main. Curium isotopes are the major byproduct in the rate. Forget about the fact that it's it also comprises a significant fraction of the alpha-emitting radionuclide inventories. Forget that. It's the biggest byproduct of the radiative fuel rod. So gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, it's the biggest byproduct is the curium isotope. And curium isotope, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. So when you hear cesium, you hear iodines, think curium. That's why I get the big yellow banner. My big badge banner. Oh, here, YouTube's not receiving enough. I'm on fiber optics. I got a gigabyte a second upload speeds. So I'm either going to have nothing or really good connection, right? So that's just effing with me. The nuclear industry safety, according to the June, plutonium 239, which is named after the devil, was 23,000 times higher than the government's estimates. It was around, we've done the numbers at 2%. So when you look at the entire inventory that's known, and you're talking about 54,000 pounds of plutonium was released. Provide guidance so the material exceeding 100 atoms a kilogram are not used in milk supplies for use in powdered baby formula or for direct drinking to babies. So materials exceeding 100 becquerels a kilogram are not used. Listen, you can't control the pandemonium that was taking place in Japan in the first couple of months. You couldn't control that. The farmers were told, and the farmers were checking it, not academics. They're not going to Fukushima. And the farmers were told, if they were given shitty Geiger counters, they were told that if you encounter high numbers, just mix it with food that doesn't have such high numbers. And then the Geiger counters they were given were just inferior Geiger counters. I mean, that is a stunning revelation, that one on its own. That's just a stunning. So conditions at the Fukushima power station, Daiichi, so everything they're showing you there is a lie. That's a lie. That's Unit 1 they're talking about. But Unit 1 detonated. Right? So there is nothing functional. This was 100% lost inventories of 9 reactor cores. But yet they put out these schematics with these numbers that would suggest that everything was intact when that simply was dishonest in every sense. That's what the industry does. Everything is dishonest. For reactor 2, which is the next one, we'll do reactor 2. U.S. government experts think the melted fuel rods landed in the water under reactor 2, causing a steam explosion. Because the water expands per liter 1,800 feet, a cubic, 1,400 cubic feet in a millisecond, right, for per liter of water. Pressure dropped dramatically at the same time. Well, you had a tsunami run through the site, so there was no way to quantify that you had instrumental readings. Does that make sense? Just hang on a second. I always got to do this the hard way. I was just trying to find the tsunami pictures, but sometimes I showed lots earlier. That doesn't mean. Oh, I know. Never mind. Let's keep going here. The unimaginable was happening. NHK, which is a major media in Japan. Workers say part of Reactor 2 containment vessel was destroyed after alarming pressure readings. Or allow bang pressure 0. There was no instrumental, folks. Potential global catastrophe from Fukushima Unit 2 highly radioactive fuel. Reactor could be destroyed, making Tokyo area uninhabitable. Well, Reactor 3 was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor for starters. So if a reactor, not just Reactor 2, but any reactor is destroyed, it means you should have abandoned Tokyo. And then Reactor 3 is a clear indication of that, right? So Reactor 3, and I guess I didn't click on Reactor 2 like I thought I did, but here's Reactor 3 numbers for the Daiichi. And Reactor 3, of course, detonated, ejected the reactor core right out of the building. Crucial equipment, shockingly feeble-looking, mended with tape. Reactor number 3 is like an ashtray filled with cigarette butts. Number 3, well, here we go. Like at the main issue you got is a tsunami ran through the site. Right? And it's the same tsunami that ripped up all these communities. And then Reactor 3 explosion, of course, was a vortex, massive. And this was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. The entire reactor core and the fuel pools were ejected from the buildings. And then like, you know, we covered some of the emails there earlier where they were saying that 10 days after this happened, they were in there with wrenches removing a pipe section on the side of the building. And the building doesn't, like, these are lethal doses from where whoever took this picture from, which is up by the administration building. It would be like Chernobyl on steroids. Each reactor building, the fuel, because you had 8 reactor cores and the 2 fuel pools at the top of each of the buildings. So you're talking about 3,450 spent fuel assemblies, which is around 6 million pounds. Give or take a few 100,000. United Nations, which has no authority anywhere on the planet, but has taken over your planet like a death cult. Reactor 3 exploded a second time 24 hours later. Then the wind and the rain brought high levels of radiation over Tokyo, Sendai, Nagano. Well, the entire planet, right? Radiation export. North America has received quite a large fallout. Incredible increases in cancer, leukemia, genetic diseases, heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. You see that increasing post-Fukushima? Ask your hairdresser next time you're out. Not just in Japan, but in the northern hemisphere, particularly North America, the United States, Canada. TEPCO concealed radiation data before explosion of the number 3 reactor. Workers not informed of extremely high... The workers are the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, immigrants who don't speak the language. So Reactor 4 to Fukushima Daiichi, again, these numbers, are a normal reactor. This is not a normal reactor. Hence the reason they went in and pretend that they were in the building when they actually wasn't, even in Japan. This is just a fraction of the media that done that. That alone should terrify you that took place, that actually happened, that they had that much arrogance that they made up that story. Reactor 5 and Reactor 6. So there was a special case on Reactor 5 and 6 and a common spent fuel pool. So this is redacted picture of the turbine building and reactor 6. So the question is, why did they redact and pixelate out reactor 6, which is quite a long ways away from reactor 4 and 5? Why did they do that? Now reactor 5 looks normal, but reactor 6, which is this one here, and everything around it is redacted, including the turbine building. I'll just point that out for you to make sure. So this, all of this is redacted. Everything here is redacted. Why is this all? Why is turbine building redacted? Why is number 6 redacted? Why is all of this area here redacted? That's a frightening thing, and that's never been explained. So unit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. March the 15th, this is day 5. The fire at unit 4 occurred and reported that the fire was extinguished spontaneously. So does that look like the fire went spontaneously? It was just like a quick fire that it went out? Or does it look like the building is completely destroyed? Which is my assertion. The building is completely destroyed. The fire occurred at Unit 4 on the 16th, so there was a second fire on the 16th. Reported no fire could be confirmed on the ground on March the 16th. Now, when you look at this picture, are you going to say, no, there's nothing happened, or are you going to say, yeah, that was destroyed? Which is the appropriate thing to say. The self-defense force started spraying water over the spent fuel of Unit 4 on March the 20th. And I did show you one of those pictures earlier. Let me bring in one of those pictures right now, hopefully. I'm getting a bit better at it. And these are such difficult stories, unfortunately, to put together. They kind of zap you again, right? Because it's a mental torture when you're reading through 1,000 emails. That's torture. Because every one of them's a lie. And do I challenge this lies? And do I challenge those lies? And water spray of around 150 tons using concrete pump trucks was carried out, which is, you can see the orange extension over there. There is no fuel pool. This is done to manipulate you into thinking that the nuclear industry has this under control. That's simply not true. Common spent fuel pool. So this is the common spent fuel pool, which is right beyond reactor 4. It's on the same street as reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. And reactor 4 is down here. So the tsunami came through reactor 4, went through this building, because this building is a very low building to the ground. And this is where they were storing reactor cores from all 6 reactors. That couldn't be in the fuel pools. And most of it's in the fuel pools because you have to keep it there for a decade or two, depending. If it got damaged, you might never remove it. And then behind it, you can see where the tsunami ran up both sides of it. And what you're looking at is transport truck containers stacked up, strewed around the back, in the very top center. But the big question is, why is the common spent fuel pool completely pixelated out? So why was reactor 6 completely pixelated in the turbine building? Why is reactor 4 completely pixelated out? How can he suggest that there was no fire in reactor 4 or reactor 3? Common spent fuel pool is completely pixelated out, which, now these pictures were released in a batch of 736 in 2021. And we never, no one's ever covered these pictures, as far as I know, only myself. The picture, I found them on a Chinese website on a story about Fukushima that I had translated. That was the same as a lot of other stories that came out that day. And I got a tendency to do it because I'm a sucker for punishment. But when I scrolled down, there was a notation down below with links to TEPCO's website. And so I clicked on it, and it was a download. And there was 10 links there, I think it is. And if you go back through my collection, go back last year or a couple of years, and you'll find 736 pictures that were released in 2021. You'll actually find links below to those pictures. You can download them all yourself. And they were from a very high quality drone. And when I zoomed in, to my absolute shock and horror, everything was redacted in reactor 1, 2, 3, 4, reactor common span fuel pool in reactor 6, and a section up by the main gate was also redacted. It was confirmed that the water levels of the spent fuel pool was maintained almost at full March the 18th, but there is no fuel pools on March the 16th, let alone 17th or 18th. Water spray over the common spent fuel pool was started March the 21st. Like, the evidence clearly shows that building was significantly damaged. If the fuel, and they had no electricity, if you don't have circulation, they'll melt down. Then the question is, again, power was started to be supplied March the 24th, which is simply not true. That's reactor 4, and over there is the common spent fuel pool. They're on the same ground. This is the turbine building you'll hear me talking about, where they were spraying water on the other side, the seaside was that way. So Minnesota City, 40 atoms a kilogram measured by gamma, which I guess the number is cesium, or a 1 sievert an hour, 1 microsievert an hour dose rate at 10 centimeter distance, or 100,000 counts per minute equivalent. So how can a microsiever be 100,000 counts per minute? And 40 becquerels per square centimeter was 6,000 counts per minute. These are crazy numbers we're talking about, by the way. But yet nothing got out. Officially, nothing got out. Injury due to the explosion of Unit 1 at Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Station on the 12th of March. 4 employees, 2 TEPCO employees, 2 subcontractor employees were injured at the explosions. Like, what are you talking about, subcontractor employees? Who are these people? And smoke of Unit 1 around the turbine building. Well, this is not smoke. This was the 8 reactor cores blowing up. These are lethal doses, the entire site. Injury due to the explosion of Unit 3 at Fukushima on the 14th of March. 4 TEPCO employees, they had already returned to work. So they were like, no, send me back into the nuclear meltdown, boss. I'm good. Nobody, like, it doesn't matter how stoic or brave you are, your organs melt. So suggesting they went back to so-called work at nuclear meltdowns, whatever that is. So that's one of the original pictures coming out. That's grainy because it's massive nuclear meltdowns we're talking about. That's another shot of reactor 3. These are lethal doses within 1,000 feet immediately. There's another shot of reactor 3, and it's right alongside of reactor 4 melted down. And it's right between 2 other reactors that melted down. And it's a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. I mean, a tsunami ran through the site. These cars are just completely destroyed. If you swing through that so-called smoke, that's a lethal dose immediately. Like Tarzan. Like, you can't get close to the bottom of this stack. It's a lethal dose. Right, I showed you that earlier, around 10 sieverts. Four members of the Self-Defense Force, one of them was transported to the National Institute of Radiological Sciences, considering internal possible exposure. The examination resulted in no internal exposures. The member was discharged from the institute on the 17th. So there was nobody got a scratch, not even a fly got a scratch. Yet the entire nuclear core was injected out of the buildings, but nobody was hurt. 2 subcontractors' employees were injured during working on a temporary control panel of power sources in the common spent fuel pool. But as I showed you, the common spent fuel pool, pictures released on the 10th year with no explanation were redacted. Right? That's reactor 4. That's the common spent fuel pool over there. Why is that completely redacted? Tsunami ran right through it, which means it had to melt down. It's right alongside of 4 melted reactors and 8 fuel pools full of reactor cores melting down. One employee had already returned to work. Oh yeah, send me back in, boss. Well, that one never killed me. I gotta go back. I'm good. I get an extra $50 a day. Danger pay. Whoever wrote that should be found and arrested, and there should be documentaries about how evil that person, a human, can be, for even suggesting that was possible. Directive from the Director General of the Government Nuclear Emergency Response Headquarters to the prefectural governors of Fukushima, Ibaraki, Tochigi, Guma was issued with direct above mentioned governors to suspend shipment and so on of the following products for the time being. Enough to make you sick on its own, wasn't it? Prefecture, suspension of shipments, restriction of intakes of leafy vegetables, flower head, spinach, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflowers, non-head type leafy vegetables, spinach, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflowers, spinach, parsley, raw milk, Ibaraki Prefecture. No, you banned everything. You abandoned. You're supposed to abandon half your country when this happened. And then the other half of the country should be getting ready to abandon it a few months later. You're supposed to abandon Japan and South Korea and Russia and China and Canada and the United States. Because of the radioactive fallout was catastrophic. It's really interesting to see how much propaganda they produce. Fukushima Daiichi plant, a propaganda vehicle. So a propaganda vehicle had entered the site. Just wait for a second. I mean, this went crazy. What a horrible people, though, isn't it? I mean, you really got to be so sick, twisted, and demented to do what they done. Just bear with me. It's so sad that a single industry is allowed to destroy every species and the future of humanity. And that people are in the positions to help me tell the story and for some reason refuse to. It's just so heartbreaking that the people we depend on worldwide to speak up and stand up. It's time to gut up, right? You ran out of time. You got nothing to lose and everything to gain by standing up against this industry. This is
Nuclear Belgium, hear the ground. Not a soul to turn it down. Nuclear Belgium, soul that's clean.
That was a song about Belgium going nuclear. At the same time, they had killer whales. We covered it last week, the die-off videos. Killer whales and other species, emaciated, showing up in their coastline. It was the most emaciated killer whale I've ever seen. And killer whales, of course, they're the apex predator. They eat over 300 species. So when they show up emaciated on your coastlines and you see this happening worldwide, you're in real trouble. And I don't understand why the Earth is not fighting back against this blatant industry. A propaganda vehicle entered the premises through the western gate. A propaganda vehicle. This is a really bizarre email. A propaganda vehicle entered the premises. This was the Downey plant, 10 kilometers up the coastline, south, through the western gate for cars, which was controlled by locking. On March the 31st, after traveling in the premise, it went away through the same gate. And this was notified to the Fukushima prefectural police. And after the propaganda vehicle went away, the gate was blockaded by a vehicle of TEPCO. So somebody went in there with a camera to get documentation. And they would have probably died that week or that day. But they describe him as a propaganda vehicle that wouldn't accept the lies, went in to have a look for themselves. They're real heroes, whoever done that. Bless their hearts. At least they tried. Regarding the break-in of the propaganda vehicle to the Fukushima Downey nuclear power station, NISA directed TEPCO orally to take careful, thought-out measures regarding physical protection. Because they're going to go and attack TEPCO, were they? At a nuclear meltdown site. Hey, maybe they were. I don't know. It was probably a scientist with pains of conscience, eh? And so then they had to demonize him. That's typically why you see that connotation, by the way. Freshwater injection to the reactor pressure vessels being carried out. Now we're back to the Downey, or the Diachi site. How are you going to inject water in the containment vessel or the reactor pressure vessel when the reactor pressure vessel was ejected right into the building and the building was completely annihilated? I don't know. You don't. It's lethal doses. The water sprayed from the ground was carried out by the self-defense forces using 5 engines, fire engines, on March the 17th. I'll show you a picture actually. Okay, here we go. Some crazy though, isn't it? The contempt this industry has for you is really something. Maybe I can't find it. That's not such a bad thing. That's the way it goes some days for me. Yeah, unfortunately, I found it. Here's what they're talking about. They had 5 vehicles on the ocean side with the turbine building in between the reactors. And then you had the turbine building to shield them from the neutron bombardments. But these people were fire department employees. They had no concept of what they were doing. They were told to spray water on a fire and put out the fire. This fire doesn't need oxygen. And water's not going to put it out. And water from this distance they were sacrificed to get the pictures so they can use it in propaganda. It really, truly is an industry with no redeeming qualities whatsoever. The pressure in Unit 3 rose significantly March the 20th. Like, how could the pressure rise in a building with nothing in the building and there's only a stump left? 3/4 of the building is gone. The fuel pools and the reactor core itself are actually ejected right out of the building. But what it does, I'm just trying to show you that this industry and the people who wrote all of these emails have never been to Fukushima even today. This was the hands of the International Atomic Energy Agency and the Nuclear Regulatory Commissions and the nuclear universities working hand in hand to take away everybody's future, to protect an industry that has no right to exist. And if the truth come out, then the world will underappreciate that this has no right to exist. Let me keep her going here. I think we've done pretty good. We're not going to get through everything, but we've done pretty good. Let me go back to this picture. So the fire trucks were on the other side down here, and they were spraying over this building towards the melted reactors. That's what you're looking at right there. Right, so you're at the ocean. You can see the ocean way over. It's that way, right? And they're down by the ocean, spraying towards me. But there was no functional. They were spraying salt water, which is the worst thing you can do at a nuclear meltdown, spray salt water. The everything was killed, right? When the tsunami ran through this site, that was the end of anything functional. Let me just explain that one. Hopefully I can find some pictures that I know the ones I'm looking for because I've covered this stuff so many times for so many years. Let me see if I can find something to help. It blows my mind. When I see somebody in a paper suit at a nuclear meltdown, you're talking about that's madness. That's the definition of madness. They're going to die that day for sure. Oh yeah, there's a good picture. Holy shit. Okay, I need one more picture. Just bear with me. I probably can't find it because I got 1,900 pictures in this folder. Now it loads pretty quick because I have pretty nice equipment. Well, it's better than nice. It's the exact same stuff you would use at the biggest medias on the planet. It's bought by the same people, from the same people they buy their equipment from. And to try to, so I can tell you a story that I can, no matter what I'm using, it'll work in tandem with it. Okay, I can't find stuff I'm looking for because unfortunately I got too much, right? And we're getting close to the end of the show, so. Whoever took this picture, they died that day. And you see that green region, it stands out more than it does in the soil. The reason they're spraying that stuff is because, and whoever done the spraying, they died that day. And whoever took the Geiger counter there died that day. Approximately 0.54 of a microsievert. Wow. Plutonium was detected all over a village 25 miles from the plant. Something terrible, dreadful is happening, said the mayor. Japan TV. Oh my, over 100 microsieverts per hour. We can never live here again. X-ray like images show how radioactivity is spread throughout the bodies of the Fukushima wildlife. You can actually see it. All the wildlife was destroyed. A community of 6,000 people were assumed to have evacuated from high radiation area. They had not. Eventually happened 3 months after the meltdown. The government doctor came and said it's okay to eat the radioactive food. We got so many examples of these people that is terrifying how evil those doctors actually were. Highest levels yet, cesium in lydiate soil. So radioactive it would have to be buried in cement, which is not a solution. You end up contaminating the earth for 1 million years, by the way. 154,000 atoms per kilogram in the soil in the village of lydiate of cesium, just the gamma. Government to focus on 8,000 square mile most contaminated by Fukushima fallout. Nobody really knows how to clean up radiation. No, we don't. You can't clean it up. They picked up 130 million bags, 1-ton bags, and 3% of the farmers, and it was farmers' fields where they wanted to grow food, and communities where they wanted people to move back into so the nuclear industry didn't have a permanent black eye. And you can't clean it up, though. You can pick up the topsoil, but that's not a solution. You got to take down, you got to dig up all the roads, all the pavement, all the trees, everything has to go. You want to dig down at least a meter or two. All that has to go. Enormous spread of radiation for, you're talking about 8,000 square miles. Even then, like, unless you get everything, it's just going to recontaminate. The nuclear reactors are still melting down. Enormous spread of radiation, levels so high in the hills of Lydiate that locals wouldn't even go near it. 150,000 microsieverts a year outside their home. But the reading monitors were 0.5 microsieverts. Dishonesty is just, they couldn't exist unless they were dishonest. March the 24th, examination of thyroid glands for 66 children. They said no harmful influences. The reality of it was 43% of the children out of 1 million. It used to be 1 in 1 million would get a tumor. Now it's 358,000 out of 1 million, 35.8%. It was 13,646 out of 38,200. It used to be 1 in 1 million. And the thyroid, you're talking about a 2 centimeter, like an adult's is 3 by 5 centimeters, but a kid's only around 2 centimeters, the thyroid gland. So you're talking about a thyroid, a tumor the size of the thyroid, on the thyroid. But what you're talking about is radioactive hormones permanently for the children that are developing, and the birds and mammals and animals and everything. And you can't do that without having mutated stem cells too, because the skeleton is not going to escape. You can't just have one without the other. And he didn't want to give out iodine tablets. They raised the level 70 times higher than the degenerate agencies already have it. Scientific experts believe Fukushima crisis is worse than the governments are revealing. The equivalent of 20 reactor cores exposed. It was worse than that. It was 36 reactor cores and 8 fuel pools at the top of 4 of the reactor buildings. This is oh my stuff, like oh my goodness type stuff. Let's just finish out today's show now. We're getting up to that time, is it? Yeah. Well, we've done pretty good. Scientific expert believes Fukushima crisis far worse than the governments are revealing publicly, equivalent to at least 20 nuclear cores melting down. Turns out it's 36. Total core meltdowns in 3 reactors, it was 4. And the fuel pool, counting the fuel pools, just 36 reactor cores. The cover story is brilliant, though. 4.3 million emails. How are you going to shift through all of that, say? I've been shifting through it for 12 years, and I barely scratched it. Every time I go in there, you're overwhelmed. So it's 560 pages in one of the PDF files, 468 in this PDF file. That's page 429. But a lot of it's in Japanese, so you can't even understand it. It's not always like that, but it was in this section. Request for the names of staff who can distinguish between a zirconium fire, an oil fire, or steam explosion from a thermal image of the Japanese reactors in the spent fuel pools. Well, let's have a look at it here. Well, that's nuclear meltdowns burned at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And former Japan official, unstoppable contamination of the Pacific Ocean is seriously menacing the U.S. West Coast. Fukushima is now an undeniably a global security issue and can't be brought under control by a single state. I really disrespect this tweet that was back when Twitter was called Twitter. 40% of the Fukushima evacuation personnel, people, received a year's dose of radiation. Like the normal consider what's a year dose of radiation is natural, harmless, stupid emitters that everybody's acclimated to through genetic superior selection. So this kind of narrative is completely dishonest. Japan cleanup denounced the disgrace. Absolutely irresponsible. The company that built the reactor buildings are leading the decontamination. Fukushima government is dumping tons of radioactive mud from decontamination into the rivers and nights. Dumping Fukushima radioactive water is government's only solution. Around 300 tons of contaminated groundwater still flow into the Pacific every day. That's equal to 2 garden hoses at 30 pounds per square inch over 24 hours. It's light years, it's thousands of times worse than that. Radiation now triple made because like a garden hose at 30 pounds per square inch is about 140 tons a day. So 300 tons a day is just 2 3/4 inch garden hoses, 5/8 garden hoses or something. It's the furthest thing from the truth as conceivable. Radiation now triple May levels in Soma City, Niigata River, double for the Mano River. They're only acknowledged in cesium, by the way. Extremely regrettable. Fukushima workers reported dumping radioactive waste from the beginning. Residents forced to dump the nuclear waste in the parks and forests. Like, if you're taking nuclear waste from your property and dumping it in the parks and forests, and you're not evacuating, you're an idiot. You're a well-disciplined idiot. You're an idiot. Radioactive force of permanent risk must be cut down. Every gust of wind showers cesium. It's not just cesium, it's uranium, plutonium. For every cesium-137, there's 100 times more strontium-90 produced. And cesium was the cover story. They're real stuff, don't get me wrong. They're nasty. It pulses energy 600 feet every second. But you can't ignore all the other isotopes. Cesium levels are spiking with unusually high amounts of fallout. Tokyo up to 300,000 atoms square meter. Home to the world's largest drinking water reservoir of its kind, built to supply Tokyo, which is metropolitan Tokyo, is 36 million people. TEPCO used radioactive water from reactor 5 and 6, 100 tons a day. How did they replace this? Because this is special bore-rated water. It has to be special water if they're going to replace it. Because clearly they must be talking about the fuel pool, or did they have... Well, we know reactor 6, the pictures were redacted. I showed you earlier, rather. Tokyo tap water, 103,000 atoms per kilogram of cesium-137. It means you should have abandoned Tokyo. There's so much evidence to abandon Tokyo. Even in 100 years, if you come to your senses and you're watching this in 100 years, you still should evacuate Tokyo. Just, it never goes away, right? You destroyed your whole country and then you call it clean and green and too cheap to meter because being evil pays really well. Local government near Tokyo unable to handle such a high level of radiation. Cesium clouds spread over many areas. Cesium clouds, as if the clouds can only bring cesium. These are what I call the horror headlines. You have to be decontaminated. You can't decontaminate from radioactive fallout. Your communities can't be decontaminated. Curium, Fukushima City, both of them got 300,000 people each. Every building is and house and infrastructure, hospitals and schools and shops and banks, they're all entitled to be decommissioned or decontaminated. But you actually can't decontaminate a building. You have to tear it down and bring it to a nuclear dump. And the industry's just got everybody hypnotized into being perfect victims. What a disgusting industry. There's nothing worse than the pro-nuclear community. They're just incredible cowards. I don't know how any of them can look in a mirror and say that they're even remotely human. The pollen will reach radioactive pollen will reach the capital. Mind-boggling cesium levels. Like the cesium fallout from the French government study covers the whole planet in 31 days, but in 20 days the whole planet's already covered. You're talking about at 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima levels, which you're talking about 20 to 30 million atoms per cubic meter of air of cesium-137. You just can't have cesium-137, by the way. But this is an awful, a monstrous, an incredible, unbelievable amount we're talking about per cubic meter of air. It's enough to contaminate every species and every human on the entire planet on its own. And it can't be on its own. That plume would have had 100 times more strontium-90, for instance. That same plume had 20 million particles of iodine-131. It had 31 times that in iodine-129 with a 50 million year half-life, which was another study out of Ottawa, Canada, of 220 million atoms of iodine-131 per cubic meter of air. There's so many isotopes that xenon-133 at 450,000 counts per minute on the ground per square meter. Like when you start looking at all the documentation and you're still in denial, shame on you. Fukushima is having the biggest effect, a bigger effect on the environment than we expected, and we don't know what's happening. Radioactive release from the plants are spiking. We don't know what's happening because the academics are too busy telling us like a banana and a potato chip and walking and such. Highly radioactive lake has built up in the depths of Fukushima 2011. In 2013, they filled up the 1,000 tanks at Fukushima from that lake, that radioactive nuclear nightmare. We got the video. I can play it for you. We play it many, many times. Let me see if I can find it right quick. I probably can't find it. You never know with Dana, though, of course. Just give me one. Let me try. I'm an idiot. Let me try. Well, we're at that time, right? The show's almost finished, so unfortunately, well, there it is. Let's play it. So I'll go backwards. A highly radioactive lake. Okay, let's play it right there. This was 2013. This is Rupert Winfield Hayes from the BBC. He's going to talk about. TEPCO's going to be there. TEPCO's going to say we have no control of the water at the site, and We're almost through the show, so let's play that.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
So you got TEPCO acknowledging they have no control over the site. All the tanks were filled in the first year. Oh, excuse me. Alrighty, we can't keep going, I guess. I'll just flash through what I got left here. There's not much anyway. This industry needs to be dealt with. Should be a 100 million people with baseball bats looking for everybody that covered this story up. They should be just wiped from the face of this planet for what they got done to us, because they're going to wipe every species from this planet by doing what they done. Every species will be exterminated on this planet because of what Japan has already done. And done with the sanctions backed up by the nuclear industry worldwide. And this Freedom of Information, 4.3 emails, all of it about covering up what actually happened. How do we let that slide, see? How do we pretend that that never happened? How do we look anybody in the face and say we never tried? Well, we won't have to do that. We've done the best we could to educate the population. We continue to do it. Big shout out to James Lucid, who donated another 300 and almost 50 on the weekend, which helped really big time again. And you get no bugs in your windshield anymore. James actually put out a song. It's just a wonderful song. We're going to play that tonight for the closing song. see everybody tomorrow night. Hopefully back on schedule. We're going to try to get back on schedule, but I'm not very healthy, and so I'm just trying to get as many shows out there as I can. I think we got 27 shows in for May. It's pretty incredible, wasn't it? Because we were doing it at weird hours, unfortunately, and that's the reason we're getting it done. So no insects on your windshield is nothing to celebrate, unfortunately, because without them the planet ceases to exist. We're on the spiral, because that's the basis of the food chain for so many species. Trouts and birds can't raise fledglings without the insects. The whole biosphere now has been under siege because of Japan. We'll see everybody on the next show. We're still trying to do 5 days a week. We're doing a pretty good job, I think. Unfortunately, I'm not in the best shape. I'm still game. So, much respect to everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. We'll see you on the next show.
Rolled out of making the sky gone pale, rain on the shield like a soft bent nail. The engine knocked like a bottle on cord, just paint on the black top and tires roll. Used to count the guts like ticker tape June. Now the windshield reads like a dead cartoon. Fleck, no grit, no tick or drum, just a flickering line in the copper tone. No bugs on the glass, no dance, no sound, no wings like sparks when the sun goes down. Where the dusk once sparked with the firefly rise, now it's guardrails and glass with no trace of flight. Across the savannah, wide and slow, river teeth jagged where it eddies slow. Flowers lean from gravel and shade, but the sky held flat like it never prayed. Maybe it's runoff, maybe it's law, maybe it's fallout nobody saw. Maybe that drift from the muck's melt sway took the color and carried it away. No bugs on the glass, no twitch, no dive, just a freeway breath trying to feel alive. Where swarms once danced in the amber light, now it's guardrails and glass with no trace of flight. I run these lanes through half-left towns, past windows bent, the earth gone brown. No bugs on the glass and none to send, just tires on tar